Okay, this video is about how to install Eclipse and Java onto your laptop or computer at home. I know we're going to there's instructions and all that, but I thought a quick video of actually watching someone go through it might be helpful. What I've done on this machine is I've uninstalled Eclipse and I've also uninstalled Java. So we're going to you can watch the entire process. I'm not going to cut out. I'm going to let the whole thing run. So things that run a little bit longer, give you a couple of odd error messages, you'll see it here. So you'll say, okay, so that's normal for me. First, we probably should talk a little bit about the machine you're on. So if you're on a Macintosh or something like that, I'm going to talk about it, but I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it because I'm doing this on a Windows machine. If you have a Macintosh and you're trying to do this, let's talk about that. You can send me an email and I'll see what I can do to help you with that. The second thing is that if you're using a Windows 7 machine, we'll find out there's something called 32-bit and 64-bit operating systems. 32-bit was, if the machine's fairly old, and if it was an older version of Windows 7, then it very well may be using 32-bit. If it's something fairly new and you've loaded Windows 10, it should be 64-bit. If we go over here, if you have a Windows 10 machine and you check here in settings about, you will see here somewhere, yes, system type, 64-bit operating system. Here it says 32-bit, then when I show you things that say 32-bit, follow that thing. Everything else should look the same. Everything is all under the hood as far as you're concerned with that. It really just has to do with how much resolution your double precision data has and stuff like that. Nothing we're going to run into in this class, so it's not really a big deal, but it will impact installing this because I have had students in the past who've gotten bagged by having 32-bit systems instead of 64-bit. So we'll get that out of the way. All right, so there essentially are two steps to installing Eclipse, and you got to go to two different websites to do it, and then in the old days, it was actually very clumsy because they were a bunch of packages and you had to do a lot of stuff manually and it caused a lot of grief. Eclipse has done a real good job of straightening that out, and Oracle for the Java install has also done a really good job of making this easier, though there are options. And so let's just walk through it and hopefully this will make you look at the right things to download. All right, so if by accident you decided to go to Eclipse first and install that first, you'll get some error messages. Don't worry about it. Just stop the Eclipse install. It'll do it itself. And then go and do the Java first, because just understand Java has to be installed first. So what we're going to do is in your Google, I'm not going to give you the web's link because that's just a pain in the butt. Just type Java Development Kit, okay, and then just select the first one here, or I think looks like I've selected the second one. I don't know what the difference is. I think they're essentially the same. Well, let's do this just so I can tell you to take the one on the top. Yep, it's the same thing. Now there are two packages of Java, so if you just put Java in there and you didn't include the word development kit, you may end up getting something called a runtime kit. All right, the runtime environment is for people who are just going to run Java applications. They don't actually do any development work. They don't program it. They just run the application. And so you need that runtime environment to do that. Something we'll explain in class, but let's just say that there's some software that has to get loaded and then the Java application runs on top of it. That powerful software that gets loaded, that environment that I'm talking about, allows Java to run on everything from the latest Intel i7 processors and the AMD Ryzen processors to embedded processors that are in things like your car or inside a microwave or some other type of application. So that's why there's billions of Java Java applications all over the world, because it can go onto so many different small machines and big machines. So you need that environment which provides an interface into the underlying hardware. All right, so we go down here, we scroll down a little bit, and you're going to see, oh man, look at, there's all these options. Well, you're not running Linux, especially Linux on an ARM processor. ARM are those things that run inside of things like your tablets, I believe it's usually Snapdragon and stuff like that. But ARM is a type of processor that is usually used for embedded devices that's running Linux. Okay, none of us are using Linux. Linux is typically nowadays it's used on servers. Things that run like web pages and stuff like that, but it can be used for personal computing. What's really neat about it in the community that's involved with it is likes it because it's freeware, and people don't like having to spend $100 or $200 for Windows Professional. They enjoy just doing it for $100, and there's a whole freeware kind of environment and community, and so Linux kind of lives in that world. So we don't need it for Linux. So here's our first choice, is the Mac OS. And so if you have a Macintosh, you will be downloading right here, right on this spot right there. Solaris is from Sun, which is a company that has been bought out by Oracle, actually. It looks like they still support it. Again, that's server technology. Again, not something you guys are going to be overly interested in. And then we get into Windows 86 and 64. Here's where we start into the 32-bit and 64-bit. Since I believe most of us are in the 64-bit, we will be selecting this one. If you're in the 32-bit, you select that one. So we are going to select that one. Oh, I didn't do something. Oh, I made a mistake. Did not agree to the licensing. So where's that? Oh, right up here. So I am going to accept it. Now, what did I just accept? Well, what Oracle offers Java for free. Okay, Java is not something that Oracle necessarily developed. It's something they've kind of assumed, and they let everybody use it for free. The thing is, with things that are free, there's always exceptions to that rule. So if you started using it and started making money on it, there may be some licensing agreements. And as we're doing this install stuff, you're going to see that starting to pop up. And again, it doesn't apply to us, but it's something involved with the business part of software engineering. So we're going to click on that guy. And you'll see at the bottom it's starting to download, which is really nice now, is a nice .exe file. Versus in the old days it was a zip file with a bunch of packages, and you had to actually, there was even some tar files and stuff back in the old days, which you had to unpack all of those and then install things manually, and it got to be really kind of clumsy. This is much easier, much easier. It's almost done. Now, depending upon the time of day you do this, depending upon the type of internet access you have, these things can take longer. All right, so everything goes away, and you get that question. You say, okay. Welcome to the install interface. We're going to say next. We don't need to mess with any of this. We're just going to say, oh, we do need to mess with this though. Or you might want to. Let me think. No, I think you should probably leave this alone on C. If you're really tight on C, you can move it, but sometimes there are some things that will look here in the C drive to make sure this is there. By default, it won't go looking around a whole lot, so I'd recommend leaving this in the default path if you can. So we'll say next. Now, the next steps is, which is interesting here, is a bunch of documentation. Now, let's understand the Java development kit is a development kit in the sense that you could do development of Java code here. Now, you have to use something like Notepad or Microsoft Word even and write all your code in that. And then at a command line, you can say, take that file that I wrote and compile it in Java and run the program from there. It would work. The thing is that with the tool, with the Elclipse tool, it's a lot. Everything's all integrated. So the tool that is writing the code is also the tool that helps you compile and link it. You don't have to learn all those weird archaic kind of command lines to get things to work. The other thing is that because the editor for writing the code is tailored for Java, it's going to give you some helpful information on what things are wrong, what things are right, how things should be set up. It's very nice because think of it as Microsoft Word, but specifically tailored for Java, or Java programming specifically. We're going to close that up. So that's good news. Looks like everything is all installed. We didn't have any error messages. I've had some things come up before because of download times. You might see something a little bit odd, but don't worry about it. Just let it go through. All right, so now we need the tool. We've got the underlying environment in there. Now we need to get Elclipse. So what I recommend is, again, you go back to Google and you just say Elclipse. You can say Elclipse Java if you wanted to. And here is the home page for the Elclipse Foundation. Notice that it is a .org. Again, this software is free. There will be licenses associated with this again. Mainly that is to protect them, but also if you decided to modify this and sell it, some of those licensing agreements may allow them to come and charge you something. I think actually if we look here a little bit, oops, sorry about that. You see about the licenses here? They have a license, they have a public license. I only bring this up because it's kind of the business part of software engineering about licensing your projects and stuff like that, and you should start getting aware of how that works a little bit, and that's part of the job. So we can go directly to downloads. We can go here. Why don't you just, I guess most of you would probably just go to downloads, right? That's probably where you would head. All right, now again, we have a very nice big button here that says download the 64-bit version, because that's what most of you have. Just in case I have some people who don't work on that, we hit the packages. I'm going to go back and make sure I showed you. See, download packages. But we're not going to use the packages. We're going, because that's kind of the old way. We're going to use the installer. And then in the installer, you're going to see we have here is the Macintosh version. Here's that 32-bit version if you need that. And here is the 64-bit. But that, make sure you are looking at the installer, because if you do it from here and you pick this, you're going to end up with a bunch of zip files. It's not difficult to make it all work, but it's just not as easy as using the installer. Okay, so we're going to pick the 64-bit, or we can go back here, just in case you guys do it this way, back to where that big, oops, I can get there eventually, where this big button is, and just press that. I guess I had to press it twice. Okay, you get to here, which is more download. And again, it's saying Elclipse 64-bit. That's what that 64 stands for. The SHA-5112 is just an encryption algorithm. Typically, I don't know if you guys know anything about, I don't know what your school has. If you have, for your wireless network, you might have WPA2 or something like that. The way the data gets encrypted across those ways is something called the SHA algorithm, way beyond this course, but that's just for the encryption of how they're doing it. They're just trying to say it's a fairly secure site. In this case, it's coming from Canada. And so we will hit download, and down over here, you'll see it start to download another executable. And once that's done, we will open that up. And eventually a window should pop up. There we go. Now, Elclipse is a very powerful tool, and it does a lot more than just Java. It does stuff for websites. It works. Actually, this is a little bit of history here. These are two programming languages, C and C++. You may have heard of them, maybe not. C was a procedural language, which means, or a function-based language, which means you kind of do one step, then the next step, then the next step, and you use very primitive data types, like only integers and reals and strings and stuff like that. Whereas in C++, you get into object technology. So back in the 70s, I believe Strustrup and those guys actually, yeah, I think it was him, started working with C. They worked for AT&T Bell Labs. You guys probably never heard of that, but that was one of the original phone companies. They developed a language called C, along with, by the way, remember we talked about Linux? Well, they developed something called Unix, which was the original operating system before that, and they used C to program it. Actually, one of the reasons why they developed that was to play a game that they were developing about Star Trek. So it has a that was what was influencing them. But anyway, it was a very successful language. It's still in use today. It actually is now more of, which we'll talk a little bit about as a sign of a side topic, and hopefully at one point, is that at the bottom, when you get closer to the hardware, you start using, you're not using Java and all these other languages, you're starting to use something called assembly language and some low-level languages. C is now pretty much the predominant language for talking directly to the hardware. But anyway, around the 80s time frame, they added objects to C, and that's where that came from. But we don't need that. There's more. There's a whole bunch of really interesting tools in here that they support within this IDE. But we're going to keep this simple. We only need that one. And so for some reason it knows it wants to install my H drive. It's probably because it's remembered. Must be some left over from when I uninstalled it. For you, if this is again looking at your C drive, I do recommend that you look around and get it off of the C drive. I'm assuming you have a C drive and a D drive, and maybe an E and an F or something like that. D is typically your DVD. Hopefully, if you have an E and an F and you have some more space on those, C is where you have your operating system, and you don't want to confine that. Hopefully you have some more. If not, if you only have like one big drive and it's all in C, then go for it. You'll be fine, I'm sure. So we just hit install. This is going to take a little while. At least it did the last time I did this, but well, it's going really quick now. You may have this run a little quick. You might even see all sorts of... One time I did this up in here, I had some messages pop up because it went off and tried to install something. And sometimes if the network is slow or the servers are slow, you might see some messages saying that something is going really slow and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't worry about it. I didn't have any problem. I just had to wait through it, and it launched. It probably added about 2 or 3 minutes to the install process. But anyway, at this point, we have completed the installation. So you first install the Java development kit, then you installed Elclipse, and now we can launch it. And so this is the first time you'll see Elclipse. I'm going to do another little video just so you'll have it again that shows you how to write your first program in it, and actually just basically the basic mechanics of it. And again, I only want to have these so in case you have to reinstall or in case you have to, when you're first doing it and you're getting some weird errors, you'll have something to look at home. But here's one that, again, the same thing I was talking about before. I don't like to fill up my C drive with data from applications or work that I'm doing. I rather much prefer having that on an outside drive. I think somewhere in here I have, that's Elclipse, Java projects. That looks good. I'll select that folder, and that is now, what is my workspace? The workspace is where all your projects, all your Java code, all your work, all your programs that you write will all live in that workspace. So it's a folder that'll have everything in it. So, because that's part of what this integrated development environment, IDE, integrated development environment, basically what it's going to do is it's going to hold all your files, it's going to hold all your projects, it's going to hold all your programs, all inside of this one program, so that it makes it easier for you to manage. What we're going to find is that there are an awful lot of files that get created in Java programs, and you're going to want to have something helping you organize it. If not, you have to do it all manually, and that's prone to error. So let's launch this guy. Oh yes, I would also click this because that'll make this workspace the one I always use, which is what I want to do. So we're now launching it. Again, it might take a second, I guess. And we're at the welcome page. And feel free to come in here and read whatever you want. Excuse me. Nothing here I think is overly exciting. So let's get out of here. And this is the tool. What we're going to find is that here in this part over on this place here, you're going to be putting in your packages, which will contain all your source code file names and stuff like that, the libraries, the objects that you're going to create. In this space is where you write the code. And down at the bottom here, we're going to change this up a little bit. This is where you're going to see the program get executed down here. So we'll talk more about this space in the next video. I hope you found this helpful to at least get you going. And the next one, now that you have this running, hopefully it'll get you comfortable with using this tool. There's an awful lot of reason why this is important. You see here, there's a lot of stuff here. And most of this is way useless to all of you for a long, long time. And what's going to be important is the program that you write and understanding the language. It's not becoming an expert in this tool. It's from day one. Let's make sure we all get that straight. This is not a course about becoming an Eclipse expert. This is a course about learning Java. Because your exams, and will never include, as far as I don't think we will do this, will include anything about Eclipse. Your exams will all be about the language, and your final exam for the AP part is all based on the language, not on Eclipse, as far as any of the example ones that I looked at. So anyway, I will, hopefully you got something out of this, and I will see you in the next one.